Thank you everyone for joining this weekly webinar. I'm just giving everyone a few seconds to join from the waiting room. And we can go to the next slide. This is May 16th. This is our weekly Q&A with the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. This is Sabrina Paganoni. I'm one of the investigators at the HEALEY and AMG Center for ALS at Mass General. And with me today, we have our patient navigation team, Catherine Small and Alison Bullat. So thank you for being here today, as well as Jessie, our assistant who brings this platform to you every week. Next slide. As you know, in the platform trial, we have a common protocol and shared infrastructure. And so far, we have added 7 drugs. This means that we are using the same infrastructure to test multiple drugs under the same unique protocol and governance structure. And this helps us with efficiencies because we can test more drugs faster. And we're really grateful to the over 1,300 participants who have joined this initiative from over 70 sites that have been enrolling across the US. And this is really amazing to see the interest in this trial and how people continue to contribute to ALS research, both by participating in this trial and other trials. Next slide. So I told you we have a common protocol, and so every drug is tested in a similar way. And because we're combining the infrastructure, we can use a shared placebo, which results in lots of advantages because we don't have to put as many people on placebo, and overall the sample size is smaller. At the end of the day, we want to give every trial, every regimen drug, every single drug that's tested here, a go, no-go decision, because the purpose of this trial is really to rapidly screen drugs and decide which ones are worth moving forward to phase 3. And so we test every drug using the same schema that you can see on the slide here, where we compare people on active drug versus placebo over 6 months. And then everyone who completes the 6 months trial can move on to active treatment extension. Next slide. Now, we are very excited to have completed enrollment for the most recent 2 regimens F and G. They're testing different drugs, both very interesting drugs manufactured by industry partners, Calico, AbbVie, and Denali, respectively. Very exciting to partner with these 2 partners to test their drugs, which have targeted very important mechanism. If you have any questions about the drug mechanism of action, we have a series of webinars that have been recorded on our website that explain the mechanism of action of these drugs and what we're trying to accomplish with each regimen. But the first step, the first milestone in the testing is making sure that we can enroll all the participants that were expected to be enrolled. And we have achieved that. So now in essentially a period of 12 months, we've been able to enroll all of the participants that were needed for these 2 regimens. And that's a large number of participants. It's over 550 participants total. And that means that each drug, the countdown for each drug now has started because we're now following the participants. So I want to communicate that while we have enrolled all participants, the work doesn't stop here. In fact, we are really appreciative of all the participants that are continuing to come back to the sites or engage with the study teams, because it's by following their outcomes over the next few months that we will be able to tell if these drugs work or not. So now we are still in a very active phase of the trial, not enrolling new participants, but following them actively and measuring a variety of biomarkers and other measures that are so important. Number one, obviously to test if these drugs work, but also to learn more about ALS. Next slide. So because we're not enrolling at this time, we want to continue to communicate with the community that there are other enrolling trials. And there are a variety of sources for you to find out which trials are still available in terms of enrollment. You can use any of the resources on this slide. Some of them are more like that kind of government websites like clinicaltrials.gov, which historically has not been very easy to navigate. But I have to say that they updated the system a few months ago, and it's much easier now than it was in the past. But even more patient-friendly than that, we had the ALS TDI trial navigator and the ALS signal from IM-ALS, and both are very easy to navigate and I think provide excellent information. They're a little bit different, but you can try both and see what's available near you. In addition, a number of other organizations listed on the slide, including NILS that we partner with, and also other organizations have websites and opportunities for you to learn more about ALS research and trials. Next slide. And I want to mention that the field of ALS is also very active on a number of other initiatives. And I want to highlight the role of NILS and the NILS webinars in sharing awareness and information about these other initiatives. So we partner closely with the Northeast ALS Consortium, and they have really phenomenal series of webinars. You can attend them live, or you can watch the recordings that are available on the website. And Catherine can prepare QR codes and links on each one of these slides. So, and thank you also for posting them in the chat. So you can access them by checking the chat, or if you point your camera on the QR code, that will bring you there, or you can use the link. And these slides are also available for download on our website, as well as the recording of this webinar, so you can always go back. Last week, I gave this webinar with two wonderful colleagues, Dr. Terry Hammond Patterson and Kelly Watney, who are from Temple and Virginia Commonwealth, respectively. And we spoke about an initiative that's not a trial, but I do want to mention it here because it's part of the NILS webinar series, and also because I think it's of great interest. So I would encourage you to take a look at the recording. The webinar was about the ALS Better Care Act, which is a bill that was introduced in Congress, a bipartisan bill, introduced both in the House and the Senate. And this is to support ALS care and ALS clinics more, so that the multidisciplinary care that we know is associated with better outcomes, better quality of life, better survival, can be fully available to people living with ALS. Right now, we want to make sure that everyone can have access to this level of care. And we hear that there are some areas of the country that are underserved, et cetera. And also even the big cities, need additional support to be able to expand the services so that they can really be patient-centered. And we heard from people living with ALS that they prefer this model of care. So this bill hopefully will help improve our care as we develop new drugs. So check out this webinar. And then if you go to the next slide, another webinar that just happened this morning, actually, is about All ALS, or Access for All ALS, which is a webinar I was on as the moderator with my close colleagues, Dr. James Berry from Mass General and Dr. Bob Bowser from the Barrow Neurological Institute, who are leading a group of sites and a group of investigators, including myself, on this new initiative that's a large-scale NIH-funded initiative that aims to enroll over 2,000 people living with ALS. And there's many different options for enrollment, in person, remote. It targets both people that have ALS right now and also people at genetic risk of developing ALS. And the goal of this amazing initiative, first of all, it's a great collaboration in the community with many people, many stakeholders, NIH funding. So really fantastic that the NIH is leading biomarker research in ALS in this way, and has provided funding that will really transform the field. I'm a firm believer that the knowledge from All ALS will be critical as we try to understand more about ALS and the disease, which will in turn allow us to develop more drugs and do more trials. So if you missed that webinar, please check out the recording. It will be up on the NILS website tomorrow, because we just gave the webinar today, but by tomorrow it should be there. And I also want to mention that as we do trials like the platform trial, we're also contributing biomarkers. So there's many different initiatives, but I want to share that we are all collaborating. We're all trying to make progress together. and all these different initiatives synergize with one another. And then there's, lots of other webinars that are part of this news series. And the one on the slide is about use of supplements or off-label treatments. There's a lot of, the webinar series is informed directly by the questions that people like our patient navigation team or others in the community here from the community. And so feel free also to send us questions about topics you would like to see on our webinars. Next slide. And certainly another hot topic in the community is expanded access, or EAPs. And so we get many questions about this topic. And for that reason, in collaboration with the Patient Advisory Committee, we have revamped our webpage and resources. Please check them out. And also don't miss the second week of every month on Thursday. This webinar is devoted to EAP projects. There's a few that are ongoing and more that are coming up, which is very exciting to see that there's more opportunities in the field. Next slide. And speaking of EAPs, we have enrolled the first participants in 2 of the most recent EAPs, the Predominant EAP and the RAPA EAP. So you can check the press releases, and we will continue to update the community. And we'll have actually some of these webinars will be about these programs. Next slide. And so just to give you a sense of, how we want to communicate with the patient community, we're here on the webinars. We have phone number and email for our patient navigation team. You can feel free to register ahead of time for the webinars, or also sign up for the ALS link, which is our newsletter that brings you all the latest press releases in ALS to you directly. We have a few upcoming webinars. A couple are lined up, and we're thinking about some special guest speakers. We'll keep you posted on that. And then June 6th is canceled because we have a conference with all platform trial sites. And so we'll be in Denver actually for that. So, and then we'll see, we'll share some updates about our summer series so that you know what to expect on these webinars. So I think we can take down the slides and take a few questions. So one question is about Regimen F, and the question is, will the preliminary results be available before completion of the trial? So for example, if somebody has completed the randomized portion of the trial and they're now in the active treatment extension, will you start analyzing the data of those people who are further along in the trial? Well, actually, we cannot do that. We have to wait until everyone has completed the randomized controlled trial to lock the database. And so essentially the way this works is that right now there is an active process of data management. So all the data that you kindly contributed is being cleaned and queried and checked and validated. It's a very rigorous process, and for good reasons, because these are obviously impactful efforts, and so we want to make sure that the quality of the data is the highest. And so the data is being actively worked on from a data management perspective. However, the actual analysis, so comparing things, or asking questions like, are people doing better on this drug or not, that cannot happen until all of the data has been cleaned, managed, curated, and assembled, and then the database is locked. What that means is that essentially there's no more data coming in. We have verified with a very rigorous process that all the data has been cleaned, curated, and it's at the highest standards. And only at that point, the database is logged, so nobody can make changes to the data. That's when the analysis happens. And so we know that in a few months after everyone has gone through the process, basically we've followed everyone for at least 6 months. That's when we're going to do this type of data analysis. Few questions about other webinars. Were for example, this morning's webinar recorded? Yes, it was recorded. I believe that it will be posted tomorrow on the website. Just to just letting the administrator QC the make sure that everything is good on the quality of the recording, and then it will be posted. All the news webinars that we are talking about here are recorded and posted on the website, normally the day after the webinar. So good question about what to expect next in the platform trial. Are we in discussions with other pharma companies to add new drugs to the platform trial? Yes, absolutely we are. And so we're now working on all the contracts so that we can add more regimens over the next few months. There's sometimes this contracting takes a little bit longer, and all other things like drug availability, manufacturing have to be completed before we can actually add something to the platform. But we're definitely working with 3 companies, and I cannot wait to announce this. But first, we need to make sure that again all the contracts and all the logistics have been clarified. So Catherine, you mentioned you received a few questions from patients this week.
Yeah, so I wanted to get your thoughts, Dr. Paganoni. I know I'll be forthright with everyone. I do not have any letters after my name besides the bachelor's degree. So my conversations with patients may look a little bit different. And I am still hearing from people who are recently diagnosed or newly diagnosed with ALS who are interested in research, and knowing that the platform trial right now doesn't have openings for new screening visits. I was wondering what advice that you give to your patients who are interested in research right now.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm always really blown away by the generosity of the population, the ALS, everyone living with ALS, because it's amazing that, oftentimes I hear that, what people really want to do is to contribute to the field, contribute to finding new drugs, help with biomarker research, help others. And so that's a conversation that I also have very frequently in my clinic. And again, I'm just so thankful that people think about the ALS and really how to contribute, how to solve this together. So that's really wonderful. And there are many studies that are open right now. Well, actually, speaking of this morning's webinar, the All ALS study, which doesn't have a drug, but again has very ambitious and important biomarker goals, which will ultimately help us develop new drugs. That's going to open this summer. Over the summer. And so I don't have an exact date, but that's coming up very soon. There's a number of other studies that are open for enrollment, especially in terms of biomarker studies, digital tools. We have a lot of studies now that are ongoing to try to understand how can we leverage technology, smartphones, apps, those type of things to make progress faster in ALS. So everyone is welcome to participate in those, and generally the eligibility criteria, so the barriers, I guess, to get into those studies are lower. But then in terms of drug trials, I know that people, understandably so, are also interested in so-called interventional trials, meaning trials where people get an actual intervention, such as a drug. There's a few open right now. And so those are available. I highly recommend the TDI Navigator or the IM ALS Signal, so that people can go and check not only what's available, but also where they are. So there are features on those websites where people can check what's available in their area. Now, I will acknowledge that right now there's fewer drug trials open than just a few months ago. And that's something that we're actively working on to try to reverse, right, to try to bring more drugs to trials. Unfortunately, as you know, there's been some even very recent news about trials that were stopped. And so the availability of spots for drug trials continues to change over time. But I would say that definitely biomarker research, there's a lot of research available right now, and trials, a few. And I expect more over the next few months. Also, please feel free to talk to your doctors and clinics. We think that research is an integral component of ALS care. And so some clinics do have actually research teams participating in clinic. I know that that's perhaps not every clinic, but whenever possible, there's most clinics try to at least incorporate a little bit of research, or at least there are brochures. And that's also why we have all these webinars and other opportunities available on the web, because if people are are going to a clinic where there isn't a strong research component, there are other ways to get involved. I also want to put in a plug for the CDC ALS registry. It also allows participation in research remotely, and they have very important biomarker research, as well as lots of questionnaires and other surveys to better understand the causes of ALS. I think that's also very important. So somebody's asking about some interesting news that the prevalence of ALS is expected to increase. Yes, I mean, that's, I don't know, I mean, I think that we don't know yet how much, ALS prevalence, meaning the number of people that are diagnosed with ALS and live with ALS, why the number will continue to increase. I mean, one of the reasons is actually the aging of the population. That, as you know, at least in some parts of the world, the population is getting older in general, and actually aging is the #1 risk factor for ALS. So the more people live, the more at risk they are for developing different diseases, including ALS, Alzheimer's, other neurodegenerative diseases. In fact, while we know that there are many young people who have been diagnosed with ALS, and the median, if you look at the average age of onset, it's more in the 55 years old, and there's actually increase in prevalence for people in their 60s or 70s even. So before the prevalence goes down when people reach their 80s. So again, I think that aging is a big part of this. The other reason the prevalence may continue to increase, and that's actually a good thing, is better awareness, better diagnosis, faster referral to ALS clinics. You can imagine that if people go undiagnosed, that means that, basically they're not counted. And so the fact that we're having so many efforts from many angles, the government, foundations, industry, academia, there's such a push towards earlier diagnosis. For example, in families at risk via genetic testing, there's even a push in following people who are at genetic risk for the purposes of hopefully preventing ALS. That's the ATLAS trial for people carrying the SOD1 mutation. So there's a lot of efforts, and with better monitoring, we can diagnose ALS earlier. With more awareness, more people can be referred to the right doctors. And that's actually a good thing in the sense that we want people to have access to treatments, research, care earlier. So I think those are all the questions that we got tonight. And so I think I'll then end here. And Alison, Catherine, anything you want to share based on things you've heard from the community this week?
If I can, I was going to propose one more question that has been coming up recently. So I know we're talking about, we're constantly in conversation about future regimens and therapy evaluation for the platform trial. So I think it's been a while since I've talked about the therapy evaluation committee and kind of explaining a bit about at what stage would a new drug candidate be something that could be considered for the platform trial pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are in constant communication with many companies, and essentially for this trial, which is more in the phase 2 stage, which is kind of in the middle of drug development, we need drugs that have already had at least some studies done to evaluate for safety, kind of dose and target engagement. Are they doing what they're supposed to do? Are they engaging their biological target? So some preliminary data in humans before we open it up to a phase 2 study, which is generally, larger than a phase 1. We also want to have drugs that obviously have a strong scientific rationale that's based on a combination of evaluations, such as data in animal models, in vitro models, in the lab. And so when companies have that, have that package, they can apply to be part of the platform trial. And so if things line up in terms of, the data package and also the availability of the drug, then we can move forward. And again, we are in conversations with multiple companies about that. And sometimes it's just a few logistical things, affect when exactly a drug can start, but we're working through them. Great. Thank you so much. I will see everyone next week. Thank you.